perhaps less in demand but more accessible piece of South Korea that foreign visitors are trying to get their hands on.
Let me just put that out.
You have a prop.
I have a prop.
What
and
is that?
It is this.
Oh, the 만원?
It's 만원. And you of course, the portrait of King Sejong.
Yes,
We're
yes.
familiar with this.
Uh-huh.
But let's look a little to the center. Yes. So this painting, it's called 1월 5봉도, literally the sun, moon, and the 5 peaks.
Okay.
This is a painting we always see in like period pieces whenever
right.
there's a portrait of the king that was always behind the throne during the Joseon dynasty. So the sun here, that's the red part right here, that symbolizes what a lot of scholars say, the king, the moon, the queen. And then we have the 5 peaks, kind of denoting a mythical place like the yin and the yang and the universe and the king who sits in the middle of that throne as a sacred power.
Okay, so why the sudden demand for this centuries-old art now, like all of a sudden?
K-pop demon hunters.
Oh, still?
Because the 1월 5봉도, the screen, the painting, makes multiple appearances throughout that cultural phenomenon, including as a backdrop to the Huntrix, them singing of Golden. So those in the banking industry say that the demand for this bill has been rising, especially across Southeast Asia, as a souvenir. Because, depending on the currency rate, not a super expensive souvenir. Right. And while we're on the topic, here are some other heritage items that are on the 10,000 won bill. So we, of course, have the king, the most revered King Sejong from Joseon dynasty.
Yes.
And then we just talked about the 1월 5봉도 painting behind the king. By the way, this was always so strongly associated with the king that the kings were even buried with the painting behind them.
Okay.
And the painting was always only deemed complete when the king sat in front of it. But then I want you to also pay attention to what's behind the painting. The Korean writing right here behind that
What does it
만원.
say?
This is a part of 용비 어천가, the song of dragons flying to the heaven, basically telling the achievements of Joseon kings. What's really significant?
Yes.
First poem written in Hangul. And it says, 뿌리 깊은 나무는 바람에 흔들리지 않고 샘이 깊은 물은 가뭄에 마르지 않고 시내를 이루어 바다로 간다. Just to translate the first line, just roughly, a tree that has deep roots does not waver in the wind, which is a very important message for a king.
Yes.
And then on the back, it highlights the scientific achievements of the Joseon era and King Sejong as well, like an astronomical clock, painting of the stars, world's old astronomical painting. So that is kind of a celebration of Korean heritage on, again, this day.
In this job market, getting that message that you got the job, means everything. Right? But for this person, that joy was taken away after just a few minutes. So
literal minutes.
no.
And it is now going to get costly for the companies to send out those mistaken "you got the job" messages, because that now qualifies as wrongful termination. 부당해고. So we go back to this case from 2024. This job seeker, surnamed Park, applied to a global strategy/business development position. He went through 2 rounds of interviews, got a message that he got the job. This was on June 4th at 11:56 a.m. at noon. 4 minutes later, he got another message. 합격 취소입니다. The company's rescinding or simply canceling that job. So Park filed a case with the local labor office, and both the local and the central labor offices deemed, yes, this was wrongful termination. The company was like, well, we never hired him, so how can we fire him? They filed for an administrative lawsuit.
like basically it was a mistake. But can you imagine how many phone calls Park made during those 4 minutes?
Right.
Probably to like his family members
Family
saying,
and friends,
I got the job, right? Well, how did the court rule on this issue?
Well, the issue at hand was this. Thus, getting a message that you've been hired or you got the job, does it constitute employment?
Oh, does it?
Right. So that's a very interesting question, because then that opens the question: severance, unemployment benefits, all of that.
Yes.
Well, the court deemed, yes, a labor contract was established the moment the company hit send on that test message, because the job post wasn't a simple guide that they're hiring, but an act that proposed a contract. It was an extension of an offer.
Right.
Well, the company argued because they also have fewer than 5 employees, 5인 미만 사업장, that they are not subject to the Labor Standards Act, which would be true, but they also have a subsidiary company. So the court actually did the math. They added the employees together from both offices. No, you don't. You have more than 5 employees. So here's that ruling.
And now we're going to talk about how people view poverty here in South Korea.
Right. So poverty, is this a personal issue or a societal issue? Of course, it is both, but how much? So South Korea seems to have this attitude where we blame the individual for his or her poverty. And this is according to the Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs survey, along with Seoul National University Social Welfare Institute.
Okay.
So they surveyed over 2,600 adults. And 89.6%, so almost 90% said the biggest reason for a person being in poverty or quote unquote being poor was their lack of motivation. 동기부여결여. So this meant that almost 9 out of 10 people thought that people were poor because they just weren't trying hard enough. And 88% thought that poverty was because one wasn't saving enough money or wasn't managing their money well enough.
Yes. Well, there was an interesting pattern on what people thought based on their income levels. So.
And this might go to a little bit of empathy. So those in higher to middle income groups, so those who are not in poverty, they were more likely to think that poverty was the individual's problem at 90%. On the contrary, those who were under the line of poverty were less to think this, those themselves in that situation at 85%.
Okay.
So this shows that people who are actually in a state of poverty felt the realistic burdens that also at least partially come from structural factors.
Sure.
So these attitudes, according to experts, it can stigmatize poverty as people are too lazy to make more money.
Right.
So experts say that, yes, of course, individuals' efforts are important, but that must also come with social safety nets and structural factors.
The South Korean government earlier this week announced its future strategy on immigration.
Right, so let's take a breather and look at South Korea's immigration policy as announced by Justice Minister Chung Sung-ho.
Yes.
This is immigration future strategy for the year 2030. So this involves launching a system to foster experts and skilled workers on various levels and expanding visas for said skilled workers.
I see. And so let's go over the details.
Right, so number 1, it's what's called a top-tier visa, and this is for, again, skilled workers. It is currently limited to 8 fields, semiconductors, AI, robots, and also to only corporate workers.
Right.
But this will expand to other STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. Also to academics, professors, and researchers, so not only corporations.
Yes.
Chung also announced the launch of what's called a K-Core visa, which would be for not top-level experts, but mid-level skilled workers. So Korean universities would develop these workers to help with personnel shortages in regional manufacturing sectors.
Okay.
And the Justice Ministry will grant visa privileges for schools that manage their international students, their legal status in a stable manner.
I see. What about other forms of immigration?
Right, so let's look at now the Regional Immigration Package Program. So this will provide information for migrant workers to go to areas that are seeing population declines, also help them get settled with social support and also education and childcare for their children.
Yes.
And there will be a pilot program for small businesses to be able to hire migrant workers, also for visas in agricultural and fisheries industries, which are currently limited to only 8 months for seasonal migrant workers, but to hopefully expand that.
Yes, but what about wages?
Right, so the ministry will also launch a panel on wages for foreign workers. So the goal is to set an annual recommended level of wages for migrant workers. So why the difference? Because there are concerns that an influx of low-skilled, low-wage migrant workers will also take away jobs or hurt some Korean workers.
Right.
So the panel will seek to find a happy medium, keeping the minimum wage, of course, but also setting the lowest and highest thresholds for such migrant workers. And the minister said that of the 2.7 million foreign nationals living in the country, 350,000 are undocumented.
Oh.
Also for industries, they cannot keep their competitiveness, without migrant workers. So the new policies, they seek to increase the migrant workers' contribution to the local economy, but also help them get settled in the country.
Well, thank you for such woggly news. We'll check in with you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.